Okay, hello everyone. This is a follow-up to the class that we just recently had on Saturday. So for anyone that didn't make the class, this is what we did. For anyone that was there at the class, this is what your homework assignment was to follow up on throughout the week. We talked a little bit about introduction, about gear that you might need. It'd be a good idea to prioritize some items before others, and of course that's dependent upon any physical limitations right now. But as I've said in my introduction video, if you saw that, I think the most important starting place is your footwear. Whether or not you start with an expensive pair of footwear is up to you. If you're not invested in wanting to get a pair of Olympic lifter, just look around the closet that you have and pick the most flat-soled, least supportive shoe you have. Other items for your consideration, but wrist wraps are going to be good for supporting when you're going overhead with either the snatch. Some form of knee sleeve is good to have in order to provide a little extra stability, keep the joints warm after you've warmed up. The knees and elbows seem to cool down the fastest after you've already done your warm-up. And of course, as you've undoubtedly noticed, my fashion, a good pair of tight pants. As your technique improves, one of the most important things that we do in weightlifting is have a good bar path, a straight line starting from the floor all the way to overhead. So as you're doing that, you're going to learn to nearly be shaving your legs with the bar as it goes through its path. If you're wearing things like bulky shorts or anything that's cumbersome like that, even a t-shirt at points, anything that can grab the bar and provide a little extra grip to the bar can slow it down, can affect the speed. And of course, speed is really what we're focusing on, speed and technique. That said, we're going to get right into what we did in our introductory lesson, which was focusing first on the 4 lifts of a session. And the reason that we call this a session is it is an assessment. If you can't do all 4 of these lifts, or you can't do them well, then we have something else to focus on before we get into the nitty-gritty of how to do the full snatch and the clean and jerk. So I'd like to go in this order because when you're practicing this yourself in the gym or at home, it's an order that should kind of have you starting from lowest and most difficult exercise to easiest exercise and highest weight, so there doesn't have to be a lot of plate changing as you go through this. So the first exercise is the military press, or what some call the strict press. So we're going to approach the bar with hands about shoulder width apart, and anytime we approach the bar, we want to walk up to it and bring our shoulders underneath. We're never wanting to grab the bar and lift out of the rack to bring to our shoulders. It's the other way. Come meet the bar first and then lift with the shoulders. From here, we're going to take a step back from the rack. And one of the important components here is your wrist position. When we come out of the rack, a lot of times, we're still holding in the top of our catch sort of positioning with our hands before you begin the lift. And you can do this with a belt on, but before you begin the lift, what I want you to do is sort of roll back so that the weight is more supported onto your chest for just a brief moment while you take the opportunity to straighten out the wrist. Because we're not trying to lift with bent fingers. Not only is that going to be difficult, it's going to hurt. So right here from the chest, in a strict fashion, without your feet or any part of your heel lifting up off the ground, all the way to overhead in a firm lockout and lowering back to the chest. At that point, you can go back to your front rack and re-rack the bar. Okay, so next is going to be the overhead squat, and we're going to approach the bar in the same manner as we did with the military press. From here, you can strict press, you can push press, you can jerk, you can do whatever you need to do to get the weight back overhead, but then maintain your lockout. And if you can do this with a snatch grip, which we'll go over that separately, you're going to want a wider grip on this. From there, we are going to lower the body, maintaining in what we call the universal lifting position, which is this nice, firm, erect spine, tight core. We're going to be pressing the knees outward. Toes are going to be slightly pointed out, and our knees are going to kind of track over our toes. Spine remains in the same position throughout the movement. We do this the same way when we have the weight in hand. It's just going to remain locked out overhead. And if you're unable to do this movement because you're feeling a natural tendency to want to tip forward, you're going to need to stop yourself at the point where you feel like you need to tip or the weight comes forward on the toe, and come back up from there. And then that's an exercise we'll work on separately with a PVC pipe or an unloaded bar. For demonstration, that movement looks like this. Conversely, if you're not wanting to take it out of the front rack, it is perfectly acceptable to get this bar overhead from back rack position. And then we're going to jerk the weight overhead and lock out, set the feet, and repeat the motion. Universal lifting position, hips parallel with the knees at the bottom, return to the lockout position, fix the feet, and slowly bring it back down to the back rack. Okay, next lift is going to be front squat. Much like the overhead squat, the same sort of milestones apply. We are wanting to hold the bar in the front rack, and we are going to drop down to full depth. Full depth meaning hips are parallel with the knees, and we are keeping that nice, firm, tight core, remaining in that universal lifting position. Once you have gotten to the bottom of this movement and you have ceased movement, you're going to drive hard from the heels, push up, stand in a full lockout, and re-rack the weight. Our final session lift is going to be the snatch grip deadlift. So much like the name implies, we're going to be assuming a snatch grip. For the sake of this video and keeping the length low, we're not going into full explanations on everything. This is a supplement to the in-person class, but not necessarily a substitute, so I may miss some of the talking points for the sake of keeping things short. But assume your snatch grip if you've gone ahead and measured that out. To explain that in the shortest possible way, basically when the weight is picked up, the bar should be about even with your hip height. So if you're gripping the bar too low, it's going to be impacting your legs. If you're gripping the bar too high, it's going to be up over the hips, as high as the belly button. We want it even with the hips. So once I've done that, I'm going to remember by using the marking on the bars about where to grab it each time. So with the snatch grip deadlift, unlike with a regular deadlift, we're not simply standing up, tightening the glutes, tightening the quads at the top. We're going to do all those things, but we want to follow the proper bar path. So we're raising this while keeping our shoulder blades tight and held together. So we are trying to, almost like we're trying to pinch an invisible object with our shoulder blades. We're going to hold that back. We're going to maintain a hook grip if you're able to use one. If you don't know what that means, we're going to be going over that. As you hold the bar, think about having your knuckles pointed down and always have a good lift off. So we want a nice triangular shape between the knee, the hip, and the shoulders when we are in our lift off position. So with the shoulders tight and the knees slightly forward of the toes, we're going to stand up first by simply having the knees get over the heels. From this point, we are going to somewhat hinge at the waist as we continue to let the bar drive in a straight path. Again, sort of shaving the leg with the bar. And once we get to the top, unlike with going through high pulls, we're just going to stop right here, squeeze with the glutes, squeeze with the quads, keep everything nice and tight, and then follow the bar path in reverse as you set the weight back down. So knees go back over the heels, and we lower to the floor until our knees are in front of our toes. And the lift is complete. So in summary, again, if you're having any problems with any one of these lifts, we need to address those things first. And then we'll start supplementing with more of the weightlifting technique as we iron these things out, or at the very least, sort of discover what your limits are, so we know how to continue to work in as safe and an efficient manner as possible. One of the other things that we talked about was proper bar etiquette and how to safely miss a lift. If you saw my introductory video, we talked about always sort of training with the mentality of not pushing past 90% of your capacity. We talked about not wanting to miss lifts, but in the event that they're going to happen, and they are going to happen, you need to know how to do so safely. The easiest way to talk about this, or the shortest way to describe this, we want to push the bar in the direction that the weight is trying to take it, and push your body away from that direction. So for example, I've done the snatch, but it's not a very good one. I'm having trouble controlling it at the bottom. The weight is tipping forward. What I want to do is use the pads of my hands, or whichever part I have a good firm grip with the bar on, and I want to push that bar in the direction the weight is going, which is forward and away from me, while I bring my own body backwards. So here we are on the bottom. I've caught my snatch, but it doesn't feel good. It's tipping forward. I'm gonna push the bar forward and rock back. All right, so what does the opposite of that look like? I've gotten to the bottom of the snatch, except for this time the weight is falling backward. Again, I want to try and push that weight in the direction that it wants to go and make my body go in the opposite direction. So here I am at the bottom, but I'm tipping backwards. I'm gonna push away and come to the knee. This may seem like a silly thing to have to cover, but believe me, it's well worth the practice and being familiar if you're not. Just at whatever gym you're at, whoever's equipment you're using, make sure there's weight on the bar. Which gets me into my next topic, bar etiquette. So I don't have clips on, which is a big no-no. You should always have clips on when you're lifting, but again, I'm doing this just for a couple of demonstrative purposes. One of the things that I see happen, particularly in CrossFit gyms, is I will see people stripping weight and dropping the bar. Bars are expensive. Olympic bars are more expensive, and if you're using somebody's $1,000 Elite Go, the last thing you want to do is strip weight and drop the bar. Main reason being is on the head shaft, on the inside of this bar, there rests a series of needle-like bearings, projections that stick out and allow for the fantastic spin that we have to the bars. If you ever use a bar that locks up, does not spin much when you're using it, that adds a lot of difficulty when you're trying to rotate the weight over to catch in a clean or on the top of the snatch. It's going to feel like you're having to use your grip the entire time to turn something. So again, with that good bar etiquette, we want to strip our weight and gently set down the bar. Never drop. If you have a bar overhead, no matter what you've seen on TV or the CrossFit Games or any Olympic weightlifting meet where they're just smacking a bar around, do not drop an empty bar. I'm going to try and cover this last topic fairly briefly just because I know I'm kind of running on the edge of how long I wanted to keep this video. Alright, so for this week we're practicing coming up hard on the toes. When there's an actual load on the bar, we should be thinking about actually jumping. So not just coming up hard, but leaving the ground if you can. The weight's going to keep you planted firmly, but that is sort of step one. Get into your snatch grip, come up to the hang position, shoulders back and tight, eyes forward, and simply accelerate. Drive hard off the toe. The next step is to add the shrug, except we're doing that all in one smooth motion. Jump shrug. If you're doing this on an empty bar and you're hearing a little clack sort of sound, you're probably doing it the right way. Lastly, we're working to see where your high pull gets to when you have some load on the bar. The idea is to, again, keep everything in as straight a path as possible, at least until we get to the bar, get the bar till about eye level. So what this means is making sure that you're not turning over, having your elbows pointing back early. Keep them straight as long as you can. When they need to naturally come back, that is about the point that the bar is going to start rotating over and you need to start working on coming underneath that weight. So in short, our sequence of movements: jump, jump shrug, high pull, and then working to get underneath the bar once the bar is at its highest point and there's that moment of weightlessness where you can turn it over and punch hard upward. You're going to let your feet move out slightly as we sort of hang power snatch the weight. Stand all the way up. Set the feet in the right position. Drop the bar. Start again. That's about as far as we got in our 1 hour class this week. When we pick up next time, we're going to be breaking down more components of the snatch and begin looking at some of the footwork required for the clean movements. As always, any questions and comments, please leave them below. If you have any pro tips yourself, leave those below as well. I am Mike from the Fortress of Swoleitude. This is for our weightlifting group at CrossFit DM, and we'll see you next time.